Well, good evening, folks, and welcome along to your Monday night rabble here on the Rangers Rabble Podcast, Rabble Network. I'm still never sure entirely what he's calling it because depending on the day, he calls it something different as well. So I just call it both. That way I've covered all the bases and we're sorted. With me tonight to go over all the talking points of the day as relates to Rangers. Of course, we had the EGM today. Conversations about Raskin, about the future of the club, what the plan looks like. Andrew Kavanagh, Parag Mathe, I think is how you say it. Obviously, they've had their 10 pence worth as well. They had an
Marathi, I hear
interview.
it as it's Marathi.
Marathi, is it? There we go. So they had a short interview as well on Rangers TV. So we'll obviously play a bit of that and have a chat about that. Some transfer rumours as well. It's been broke recently that seemingly West Ham are interested in Hamza Igaman. So we'll chat about that. The Raskin contract situation. Max Aarons, will we get that announcement this week? Plenty of stuff to discuss. With me this evening, of course, I have Kieran. Kieran, how are we?
Oh, good, mate. Been working DJing. Just before we jump into it, I just want to give a wee quick shout out. I was DJing somebody's wedding a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy that came up and recognised the voice, and we were just talking about Rangers, and he said he was a big fan of the pod, watches it, listens to it all the time when he's at work. I'm not going to tell where he works in case he gets in trouble for listening to it on the job, but his name's Graham Fikirky, so if you're listening, mate, it was lovely meeting you.
Happy days. Listen, I'll tell you one thing, Kieran, that you'll never get used to is that happening, is when people come up to me and speak to you about the pod. You just won't, because it's an odd feeling. Stu will know as well. It's because we're really not famous. We're just a bunch of guys having conversations, mainly talking pish most of the time, if we're all honest about it. But it's always a good feeling when you get recognised, if not slightly strange. And of course, I have Stuart with me as well. Stu, how are we?
Yeah, all good. Evening, everyone. Hope everyone's well. Yeah, good to be on with you guys. I've not done a pod with you for a wee while. And busy day at Rangers, eh?
It absolutely has been a busy day at Rangers. As you say, I know we haven't. This particular trio have not featured in a podcast together in a long time. Can't actually remember the last time I was on with either of you, either individually or as a trio. So it's good to be on with different voices. Okay, let's get stuck into it then, Kieran. The EGM, of course, took place today. Wilf and Trev were there. They were on the afternoon rabble with Martin live from the Doubletree at the Hilton. We're not going to go in depth and blow by blow because they've done a pretty good job of discussing a lot of that stuff earlier. But overall, I mean, I do laugh at the fact that it's called an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting. I'm not so sure much extraordinary comes out of it. I think the fact is that we've heard some good stuff today from the new ownership coming in about the vision, I suppose, for the future and going forward. There were some questions asked by fans, including their own Trev, which got answers. Some answers I felt were perfectly reasonable and good answers. Others, pretty much what you'd expect. What's your kind of overall thoughts on the day as it unfolded?
So I've not been able to fully listen to it yet, but I was kind of reading it through the group chat when we were getting the updates, and then reading it on X as well. So it's hard to say how I thought they spoke because not hearing them, but the way the answers were compelled from whoever was tweeting it out, it seemed like they were really quite interested to hear what the fans had to say. They were obviously keeping things close to their chest, which we'll probably discuss later on. But apparently they spoke really well. They came across really good. They said why they chose Rangers. And I think more than anything, they said what you wanted to hear. They want to have a winning team. And whether that's through an expansion in the future, the main priority is getting it right on the pitch. So I think that's music to the ears, everyone that wanted to hear.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Stuart, one of the questions that was asked today that piqued my interest, has to be said, because it always does, right? When you get new, investors that come in and buy majority shareholdings of clubs, of course, the natural interest becomes, well, what are they looking to get out of it? As much as we know what we want to get out of it, what are they looking to get out of it? And they were asked about what the exit strategy would be if that would look like. And Andrew Kavanagh had said, basically, we don't have an exit plan. We have a growth plan. We'll figure out the exit plan once we succeed with the growth plan. That's very business jargony, you have to say, but that you would expect that. But is that a positive sign that this isn't some, short term, we're in here for a year or two until we get our money back and then we're off? That the plan is to make Rangers a success and thereby obviously getting them a good return on their investment into the bargain.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? The more success Rangers are, then the higher chance that they'll get a better return on that investment. We've heard from certain podcasts from other teams, haven't we, that these are just American businessmen, no interest in football. It's all about the money for it. And, that didn't really stack up for me. But what I thought was really interesting was particularly to hear Andrew Kavanagh speak today, talking about he's a football fan. This isn't just a kind of something. I got a phone call and all of a sudden I've decided to buy a football club, and he still calls it soccer or anything like that. He's a football fan. Given that bit of insight that he's been to 5 World Cups, been to 5 Euros, the fact that he tries to go and see different teams, different stadiums. Did 14 in the last year, I think he said he'd done. So there's clearly a kind of passion for football as a whole, and then the opportunity to buy Rangers comes along, and that aligns with that vision. Really interesting that I think his first game he went to was in November, and by all accounts, he sat in with the fans. He was in the corner underneath the Gordon Ramsay restaurant, by all accounts, so nobody would have known who he was. But so from that initial phone call in October, a matter of weeks later, he's already in the stadium, just trying to get a sense of it. So I think it's been a bit frustrating in terms of we've been desperate to hear from them, and I think it's just been good to get this done today. I don't think we're going to hear lots from them. I think I sensed that they'll probably come out and tell you when they feel they've got something to say, but I wouldn't be expecting that we're going to hear from Kavanagh every month or every quarter or anything like that. I don't think they're going to operate that, but it was at least interesting to get that kind of initial view. And certainly I think they tried to make that absolutely loud and clear. They're here for the long term. This isn't just a short term project for them. And also interesting just about their two styles as well, Connor, in terms of, Prague talking about the fact that he's got that experience in that sporting environment, and how, with the 49ers and with Leeds, learning from mistakes that they've made there, what they can do here. Whereas actually, Kavanagh will be kind of focusing more on that kind of business aspect of it. But that exit strategy is years down the line. And for that exit strategy to be really worth their while, then Rangers need to be a success, need to be winning things. European football, probably Champions League comes into that. But I mean, I'm not sensing from them that's 2 or 3 years down the line. That's quite a way down the line.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. I mean, Kieran, the thing is, it's not just about, and again, it was referenced today by both, and rightly so. It's not just about a success in the here and now. We as fans are, in some ways, although I think Rangers fans have been remarkably patient given the last decade and a bit that we've sort of endured our way through. But in some ways, football fans can be a bit impatient. When things like this get announced, they want everything and they want it now. I mean, for instance, there's questions today about, well, what's the transfer budget? How much money are we going to spend? Who we bring? And I get that. These are all questions that fans want to know answers to, but no board in their right mind are going to tell you that and state that publicly as a fact, because that can put you significantly in the back foot when it comes to transfer negotiations and things. So when we say success, it's about a sustained success, that when they leave, the club when they do embark upon their exit strategy, that they leave us in a better place than we found us, and that we're no longer lagging behind. Obviously, Celtic at the other side of the city. That's a fact. For me, that has to put in place a return to what we all know should be the case, and what used to be the case for many years, that Rangers were in the main the most successful club. We were on top. We were, even in seasons where we didn't win the league, more often than not, you were at least competing and deep into the heart of these things. That's the type of success we're looking to bring back, as being genuine contenders to win league titles season in, season out.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking about their blueprint strategy as well, and bringing the blueprint with them. I feel when you say leave us in a better place they found us, that's not going to be hard. I mean, if they get rid of some of the dead wood, another point I want to touch on is when he mentioned about constant injuries. Again, looking at the strategy side of things, where I can't remember which one of them it was, because obviously I was just reading it, but it was something to do with mentioning that people that maybe are suffering a lot of injuries won't be needed at Ibrox. The way that it was worded in the tweet that I seen, so I don't know if anyone that's listening to it can dive in a bit deeper what was said. But when we look at the normality, I mean, as a team, we want to be winning things. We need to be winning things, and to be taken seriously in competitions, we need to be showing up and winning things. We can't just be lagging behind another team and expecting it all to change overnight. This is going to be a work in progress, and the fact that they're saying they want to get players in, but again, not able to tell us, tell us what the budget is or who they're targeting, because it can make it 10 times harder to get the person of interest. It's just, it seems that they have this strategy that they're going to follow. They know what works. As Stuart says, they've maybe learned from other places they've been at, and they know maybe what works and what doesn't work and what they can do to adapt, because it's not going to be the same demand at Leeds as at Rangers. At Leeds, they're not expected to win every single week. Rangers, you are. And they're going to learn that fast, that even a draw could be the end of the world sometimes.
Oh, absolutely can be. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? In Glasgow, a draw, I mean, it is the end of the world at times. I mean, it's the old adage, a draw is a disaster and a defeat's a catastrophe. That's very much how it's viewed. And listen, we've endured far too much of both over the last number of seasons. I suppose we'll only know with time. We'll only know when next season starts how things are going to shape up, how they look, what the squad's going to look like, what Russell Martin's style of play is going to look like at Rangers. Because you can look at all the videos of his time at Southampton or Swansea or anything like that you want. It's not necessarily going to translate that's how Rangers are going to look, because Rangers, unlike those teams, are a side that are, we are expected to be dominant in most games. We are expected to impose our will and to be the driving force. So I suppose the question is, how much patience do you think we should give? Do we have to just look at this and go, right, it's a new start, it's a fresh regime that's in the door. Maybe we can't get to October, November, and we're maybe 4 or 5 points behind Celtic and the panic button gets hit.
I think we talked about this last week, actually, this word patience, and that doesn't normally go well with Rangers fans. Look, they talked today about the fact that there isn't a honeymoon period. You don't get one. So, Russell Martin will be, I'm pretty sure Russell Martin's fully aware of what he's getting into. I thought he spoke with an honesty as well, that, he recognises that, in some Rangers fans' eyes, he's not their first choice, so he'll need to win them over. And if there was to be a bad result early on, the voices will become louder, that, it was the incorrect decision. But yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, but the thing is, sorry to cut across you, but you're right about the honeymoon period, particularly when you look at the way the fixture list has been thrown up. It's not an easy start to the campaign. Inside that first month, inside August, Russell Martin will have to play both Aberdeen and Celtic. That's going to be tough, right? particularly Celtic, because if you're playing them 31st of August is when that game takes place. That's only like the fourth game of the season. It's not often that falls so early. Usually you get at least the first month. It's usually not until mid-September, late September that game falls around. So it puts more onus on getting things right and sort of weeding out the cracks, for want of a better term, smoothing over the cracks in pre-season before you get there. Because if you go into that game undercooked and underprepared, and I hate saying it, they won't. And we know that from experience that they will not go into that game underprepared. So we can't afford to either.
No, I think there has to be an element for Rangers fans to understand where we currently are, and the amount of work that needs to be done on this. And I know people are absolutely desperate for, right, we need signings in, we need signings. I tried to make this point last week as well, that gone are the days where a manager's just picking up the phone to another manager and saying, I want to buy that player, and we'll fling in some training vests and a few balls and stuff like that. Let's make it happen. These are protracted dealings that you now go through. And just because Rangers have had a takeover, and just because Rangers need a lot of new players and we've got a Champions League qualifier, that doesn't alter how other clubs are going to act. They're not going to alter how players act, how agents act. I've got absolutely no doubt that there's a ton of work being done in the background. I'm sure Kevin Thelwell is absolutely run off his feet at the moment in terms of trying to get things moving. But it's going to take a wee bit of time. And as a consequence of that, yes, there is a danger that we could see some results in the early stages of seasons potentially not going away. But, I think you have to buy into this. You've got to give them the support. I think I liked what was said today in terms of, I know we were just chatting about this before we went live, in terms of, the fact that they didn't talk about budgets, etc. They talked about being prepared to wait if they felt that it was the right player for them, but also if an opportunity came along that they would react to it. So, I think a lot's been made of this 20 million. How much of that 20 million? I know Martin was saying this. I'm not convinced that there actually is a budget as such. I think it will just be seeing how the lay of the land is. If a player becomes available and it's the right player that works in a Martin system, then we go for him. But look, it's Rangers. Patience is a word that some fans will be willing to let it go, others won't. He'll be fully aware of that, Russell Martin. He's an intelligent guy and stuff like that. But look, we've got to get behind him. And I think there's a tendency to think, it could go badly. It could, but it's nothing to say, by the way, that, we get some players in and he gets a reaction out of it and we start winning games straight away, and let's be honest, we're the ones that go into these Old Firm games in the better form than Celtic, and I have said a couple of times that game at Ibrox, I think, is absolutely huge, because if you remember what happened to Clement, he went a number of those games without winning. If Rangers were to come out victorious, or even go, if it was a victory in that game, that suddenly turns round. Suddenly Rodgers is the one who's not winning those games. And so it can change very, very quickly. I think we just need to take a step back. We're all desperate for it. It will happen. It's just going to take time. And I know that's not an easy thing for people to accept, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll just, Cooper Livingston is not happy with me there. I'm aware it's usually the fourth game of the season. I get that. Now, without going back and looking at every single first game of the season against Celtic, right, I couldn't 100% guarantee you that you are correct in saying it's never been as late as mid-September, because there's probably somewhere you'll find that there was a game in the 20th of September or something, right? So the point I was making is still the same, right? I might have been slightly wrong with my dates. My bad. I'm not a human encyclopedia, as much as some people might think I am. But the point still remains central, Kieran, that game is early on in the campaign. as his games against teams like Aberdeen, and there's no such. I get there's no, or you're going to get easy games and just break in, but clearly, you'd rather a start to the season that basically seen you have 4 or 5 games in the trot against the basement dwellers. Of course you would, because it's an easier way to break in a new squad. In theory, at least, maybe not necessarily in practice. And that's the point about the patience. I just wonder if we lose that first game against Celtic, then the pressure will be massively on Russell Martin and his team, just the same way as Stuart says, you can win that game psychologically. That can work massively in your favour.
Look, as a Rangers manager, the pressure's on the minute you drop a point. It's constant. There'll be fans that will be calling for him if we went unbeaten and then lost the game after. It's crazy. Like Stuart said, you get no patience with Rangers. Every point dropped is an absolute disaster. Yeah, it's the way that it should be, but at the same time, the position we're in just now, and going back to the transfer budget side of things, we could have this brilliant big drop of money where we could go and buy not who we want, but maybe people that are out of budget before. Not necessarily going to be that they cut it at Ibrox. How many times have we tried to spend big and the person's not lived up to expectations? Or they've not been able to either gel with a squad, or what happens when we spend good money on somebody and they come and they're terrified to play Celtic. Do you know what I mean? You can't predict how players are going to be. We just need to get our recruitment spot on. And yeah, 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be that maybe 1 or 2 isn't going to be great, but we just need to make sure that we are behind the manager. If there is a point dropped, we can't be calling for his head already. And he knows fine well that this is going to be a huge step. If he drops any sort of points, if we have a rubbish game and maybe we win ugly, there'll still be fans calling for his head because it's not the style we want to see. We want to see us blow teams away. That's not always going to be the case. And when you mention the basement dweller, sometimes they're our hardest game because you've got them that are sitting back that'll just wait and they'll wait for a counter attack. And how many times has our defence been punished by counter attacks? We've had all the possession, all the shots, can't do anything, and we've been punished by a counter attack. So we need to make sure we get the recruitment spot on. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that we're behind the manager, we're behind the team, and that we do as best we can as fans to show that support. And there's a comment in the chat there, Connor, that's obviously from the other side of the city. They must have nothing better to do than watch us and clip us.
Yeah, we'll just ignore that.
Can I just say, Connor, I look at the fixtures and I think they're quite positive. I think they could have been far worse. We could have been away Pittodrie.
I agree.
It could have been Tynecastle and stuff like that. So actually, I looked at the fixtures and thought, okay, actually, I'm okay with that, given what we could have had. December, January, wow, yeah. But you would like to think by that point things have kind of settled down. Players are right in tune with what the manager's expecting. I listened to a couple of podcasts that had Swansea fans and a Southampton fan talking about it. And they both talked about there will be early teething problems with this, and the players adapting. But when it clicks, then actually they say, things very quickly fall into place and you can start seeing real improvement in the performances and obviously the points that you get from that. So, I think there has to be a bit of...
Sorry, Stuart, just because while it was in my head there, how much of that, when you're judging the improvements for last season to this season, where you are, how much of that can you judge based on some of the teams you struggled against last season and then how well you do against them? Because, of course, I'm looking, for example, the third game we played were away against St Mirren. Now, on 3 occasions last season, we failed to beat St Mirren. Yeah. We lost to them twice, once at Ibrox, once over at their place, and obviously had a draw in between there, right? It was not a happy hunting ground going to Paisley, and certainly they enjoyed coming to play us. Now, they'll have undergone changes as well in the summer, but as an early litmus test of that's a game we couldn't win last year, can we go and win that early on this season? Would that be a good tick in the box for Russell Martin to get to kind of demonstrate a bit of improvement?
Well, I think naturally he's going to have to show that in some of those games. A key thing for me is that the league's not over by October.
No, of course.
And that's what we've had like in the last few seasons. So would it be great if Rangers were 10 points clear come November, whatever? Absolutely. Is that going to happen? Who knows? But if we're actually still in and around it, then you could say, well, actually, that's been an improvement. And probably because of that, that means that we aren't dropping these points against the teams that, we did far too often last season. The Old Firm games were not the issue. It was how we performed, and not just away from home, also at Ibrox against the rest of the league. So, I think if I would say, let's say how the league looks kind of October, November time. And if it's still itchy peachy at that point and we're still right in there, then I can say that, yes, you're starting to see improvements within that. I think does it mean Russell Martin's going to be a failure if we draw at that third game at St Mirren? I think it's far too early to say that. But if you come November and we've continued to draw games against the likes of St Mirren's, etc., then you can start saying, actually, what hasn't changed here? What's he still struggling with? Because actually, previous managers found this as well. So that's where I'm kind of going. October, November time will be my kind of first bit to say, right, where are we?
Question for you boys then. Sorry, Connor, just quickly. So obviously we're going to be looking at possible teething issues, etc. Would you be happy winning these games ugly and not seeing a style of play where you see the improvements, or would you not obviously take dropping points, but would you prefer seeing that style of play and maybe not getting to the levels we could yet, but then later on in the season start blowing teams away and look like we're clicking?
I think the issue you've got is if we drop far too many points, then the league's done again by October.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it means winning ugly, we win ugly, then, it's up to the manager and his coaching staff at that point to try and improve the performances. And you would hope that over time that, they do that. I liked how Martin spoke about the fact, it's about penning teams in, when we lose the ball, we win it back quickly. And then when we win it back, it's then finding the ways to break down that low block.
Yeah.
Will that hit the ground running straight away? Not sure. But
the fact is, I think there's always a
1-0. I'm happy. Yeah. I'm taking the 3 points.
No, 100%. And AJ is they are saying winning ugly always catches up. At times, some point it can do. I mean, what was catching up to us last season is that we had the tendency of going 2-0 down before we started playing, and you can't do that. That's what you can't do. And that's not just exclusive to last season, because even was it under Gio? I think it was just after, or even just before Gio came in with Gerrard, we had started on a wee routine of going 1-0 down and then coming back and winning games. I think we went on quite a long run of that happening. But I actually think it was historically long in terms of the amount of points you managed to pick up from that position. But you can't do that all the time. No. So we have to still be on front foot and make sure that we're keeping the door shut at the back and not allowing those opportunities to come through. Because I do think there's a place for winning ugly. Because as much as you can say all that, in the 55 season, how many games did we win 1-0? There were a significant amount of games that were won by one goal here or there. And sometimes you need that. I mean, the game that basically clinched the league title for us was Alfredo Morelos scoring a last-minute winner away at Livingston. You know what I mean? And we won 1-0. Was it a great game? No, it was dreadful. We were coaching that day. So were Livy. The pitch there always plays a part. But we got over the line and we got the job done, which is all that matters in the end. And don't get me wrong, the fact we're so far ahead takes some tension out of it, because if you're behind and you're in that situation, it's maybe more difficult to find that winner. So I think there's a place for it. But, the cliche is
an advantage here, Connor. The fact these the other managers in this league absolutely knew how Rangers were playing last season. They knew. You know, they could pretty much probably, you know, although the personnel might change, the style of football was exactly the same. So with Russell Martin, yes, they might be watching videos of, you know, what he was like at Southampton or Swansea, etc. But there will still be an element of the unknown with Russell Martin. And I think he needs to use that to his advantage in the early stages of the season. What we can't then happen is once they've kind of figured that out, that he doesn't have a plan B. So Warburton absolutely blew teams away, you know, when he first came in, and we were all loving it. But then teams kind of cottoned on to what he was doing, and he didn't have the plan B to then change that up and keep them kind of guessing. So, you know, I think there is an advantage with Martin in terms of how teams might try and set up against us, and a bit of unknown in that. But he's got to have variations there. And now proof is in the pudding with this, but he did talk about that. He talked about, you know, yes, he's got a belief about how football should be played, but that will vary depending on your opposition and the players available, etc. So hopefully we see some variance in that as well, which may just make us more flexible and probably far more difficult to set up against, because I think we could have put a group of us in opposition dugouts, and I think we would have probably have limited some of those Rangers performances last year.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And Matt Gunner there, Kieran, I mean, I think he's making a good point about any new player that's brought in needs to be, you know, told every game you play in this league, it is their cup final, we need to match that. I think I make that right, because that's one of the things. It's about the mentality side of things, on about instilling that attitude into players that, you know, when you come and play for a club like Rangers, you can't just accept a draw. You have to push for that win. You have to understand that these teams, when they come up against you, it is a cup final for them, because it's a huge. Think about it's a massive achievement for a team like St Mirren, for example, or a Dundee, if they can beat Rangers in any game, right? Because it's not something that happens very often. So they're going to try as best they can for that. We've brought in players from the continent over the last number of years, and we've seen that some of them just haven't seemed to get that. I'm still not convinced Robin Propper, for example, well, in the tail end of last season, I don't think he got that. I think Czerny, you know, in the early part of last season, he struggled. We've seen it came to a head in the Lyon game, where he just looked utterly perplexed. Like he couldn't understand, you know, what was going, couldn't handle the heat at Ibrox. He was almost looking around as if to say, what's your problem? You know what I mean? But later on in the season, to Czerny's immense credit, he did get it. And he did start being a much, much more vital part of our game. So how does Russell Martin go about doing that? Can he use his experience of playing at Rangers, for example, to instill a bit of that in them?
I mean, I think in the past, teams like St Mirren and that, they would sit back in the low block because they would expect Rangers to have most of the ball, like under Gerrard, where we actually looked like we would punish teams. And then it got installed to this team that we were fine to let them play out. But before you know it, they're now matching us stride to stride, and they're scoring for the counter attacks, they're scoring the set pieces, and we're the ones that are falling behind. We need to, as soon as a player walks in that door, have it installed, that mentality that this is Rangers. That a draw is a disaster. A loss is unthinkable. This needs to be, I think, again, the issue was, how do you get a player on so much money up for a game in Dingwall? Do you know what I mean? A midweek game in Dingwall where there's not a lot of fans. It's not great. The conditions aren't great. The team you're playing against aren't great. That should be snapped right out of them. It should be an honour to play for Rangers, regardless what opposition you're playing. Whether it's a friendly, whether it's a bounce game, you need to be up for it for that second. And yeah, 100%, Robin Propper isn't Rangers calibre. And it's not just because the way he plays. I just don't think he has the mentality to play for Rangers. There's a good few players in that squad where it seems to be when they're not playing in a place they want to be playing, they just throw their toys out the pram. They just look like they haven't played football before. They don't look like they're bothered. It's becoming more and more where players are coming to Rangers for a stepping stone in their career rather than wanting to play for Rangers.
But to me, this is recruitment, right? You know, as long as we need a squad that provides a manager with more options. So, you know, if we've got a player whose attitude is absolutely stinking, well, you know, they should be in the stand.
Absolutely.
That's it. But you've got to then have somebody that can be able to come in and take that place and have the hunger to do that. I also think, and I think we as a fan base, the long-term believer in this, I think we make a wee bit too much of the opposition and the league that we play in sometimes. Because I think I've never been able to square the circle in terms of we've got a fan base who don't accept drawing against a Dundee United or drawing against a St Mirren, but on the same hand will tell you, oh, that's a difficult place to go. Well, is it? Is it really? We need to just get back to the fact that actually Rangers, we've got better players than them. And yes, you know, football can always fling up results and stuff like that, but we should be able to go to an Easter Road and we should be able to pick up 3 points. And that should be the mentality that we're Rangers, we're better players. If we play to a standard, then we'll be able to beat these. And if you keep beating them, then that's when you stand in the great chance of winning trophies and etc. And getting that feeling of playing for Rangers, because then you'll have us as a fan base. So I do think there is something in here about, you know, a mindset change within the squad, but also us as a fan base as well. We need to get a bit of an arrogance back about us, and we haven't had that and results have shown that we can't have that in recent seasons. But I do think that's been lacking for us. But I don't know what you guys think. Do we make too much of the league in terms of that? God, it's Tynecastle. So what? Go and beat them.
Make it hard for themselves and almost lose the game before the ball's
It's almost the excuses are coming out.
100%.
And I do wonder if some of that seeps into we're going to Tynecastle this weekend, or whatever. I do wonder if some of that actually seeps into the kind of the playing squad as well. We need
possibly. I mean, look, there is undoubtedly when things aren't going well, there does become apprehension among the fan base about, well, this will be a tough game for us because you know what to expect from these guys, but the players have to shut that out. I'm just going to bring up this super chat for Jim Sloan. I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about. But thanks very much for the £10 super chat, Jim. Much obliged as always. Connor, do you think noise pollution is a problem, especially in residential areas? The irony is that's the kind of stuff I deal with as part of my job in my everyday life.
You should know then. Come on.
It's it is a problem. Yes, certainly if somebody's applying to build anything or those residential developments getting proposed and all that sort of stuff, then that is one thing that always gets looked at. In fact, you always ask for what's called a noise impact assessment to make sure that they've thought about that. So yes, Jim, it is. I don't know why you've asked that question. It really leaned into my job there, but thanks for that. Yes. Right. One of the places, of course, where we need to make sure remains a fortress, of course, is Ibrox. And that segues me nicely to the question that our Trev put to the board, because it would be churlish of us not to bring it up. You've got to shamelessly plug yourself in these things. So Trev had stepped up, asked this question and said, could you possibly in future expand the stadium and improve the area around Ibrox? Parag had answered that, saying that the first priority, obviously, as we spoke about, is improving as best we can on the pitch. That's the urgent priority, but absolutely, they want sustained success. We have a tremendous fan base. However we expand Ibrox, we'll fill it. It will help put a competitive squad on the pitch, already looking at hospitality, etc. But right now, it's about improvements on the pitch. Now, Kieran, I think we'd all be forgiven for being a tad bit weary after some of the nonsense of just getting one stand dealt with last season. I mean, we had to start the season playing home games at Hampden, and I don't think anybody enjoyed that experience, nor would they want to repeat said experience. But it is a good question about expanding at the stadium, because again, sometimes these owners comes in, that can be part of the bigger picture. I think that is a very long-term thing. You know, we've seen the improvements that they done last season. We've obviously got the new Edmondson House, which, having been in a number of times, is a fabulous place. Bit too expensive. You know, I wouldn't recommend that you go there daily for your pints, but it's still a fantastic place. And thoroughly enjoyed my time there. So we've already done good things like that. I think we'll probably, for the foreseeable future, they'll probably leave well enough alone.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've hit the nail on the head by saying that their biggest priority is to start winning titles again, start competing in the big competition, if not doing more than we have already. I feel that, an Ibrox expansion, it would be tremendous. It would be brilliant, and they said themselves that they put the seats in, and 100% they would fill them quite easily, and there'd still be a waiting list, no matter what how many seats they put in. I just think that the bigger picture right now, before we start thinking about expansions and what they can do at the stadium, get a winning team on that pitch. That's all I care about just now.
Yeah, sure. I think that's probably the sentiment amongst most fans, that the priority, and clearly from the sounds of it, the board's priority as well, is on the pitch. You know, get his success on the pitch, and then everything else can fall into place. But I mean, also not wrong to say, if we expanded the capacity of Ibrox to 70, 80, 100,000, we would fill it, no problem. There's no doubt about it. There is always a waiting list for season tickets anyway. Albeit towards the tail end of last season, it was fairly easy to get tickets to go, but that's because the league was done and nobody was really interested in going, especially when we were getting beat every week. But when things are going very well, and the stadium sells out no problem, there's always an excess of people wanting to go. So from a financial standpoint, if the club could get success on the pitch and then they expanded the stadium, I think it'd be a win.
Can I just see the noise pollution, by the way? That's all aimed at me. So I did get it, but that's, by the way, I wasn't even there, so it's not even me. So
I forgot about that. Aye, of course. This was you. There was a review.
Weird that Martin's just run about my house taking videos. You know, that's probably a bit weird. But I wasn't even there. But I look. I think is it something that they're considering? Probably. You know, they'll have a priority list. So I think it would be lax of them if they didn't start having or getting people to possibly start looking at what potential works could be done, etc. But I think there's clearly things that they believe that they can do way before that. So, I think they were talking about the hospitality areas, etc. You've got the old club shop that's still sitting there empty, it's just wasted space at the moment. So, is there stuff like that they could do? And then longer term, Rangers need to be in a position where we're on par with Celtic when it comes to the capacity of our stadium. You can't continue to be £10,000 seats worth of season ticket money down at the start of each season. So you're already playing catch up. And that, so it's something that will have to happen. How quickly that takes place, I'm not sure we're going to see anything moving on that quickly. But I don't think that's something that could be done quickly, because I'm not sure there's an obvious solution to it as well. So I think it will probably need a bit of thinking. It'll cost quite a bit of money, so that will obviously have to be factored in. But long term, something we need to do. But first and foremost, Rangers fans just want to see a successful team on the pitch, and then we can focus on that. I do think there's things that they could do with the stadium, though, other than just increasing the capacity. There's certain areas of it that are looking a bit tired. Even just the general, walking round it, the tarmac, all of those sort of things. things like that, actually, I think would be great improvements and make the experience of going to Ibrox far better than what it currently is. So, like I say, even within the stadium itself, I think they'll have a priority list. Capacity increase will be one of those things, but I think it'll be down the line.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Right, one other question to ask from the EGM today, and then we'll have a quick chat about some of the transfer rumours as we round up the last 15 minutes or so. But as I said to you guys before I come on here, I was keen to just briefly touch on this because I haven't been on or had the chance to. But it was asked at the EGM today about obviously the issue concerning the fine that the club received for John Brown's comments, and seemed to bring the house down, seemed to get one of the more loud receptions on the day, which I think just tells you there's still an anger about it. But when asked about it, Patrick Stewart had said, good point, the club was charged, not John Brown, made false statements, the SFA were inconsistent, but we have to work with them, so we can't go on the front foot all the time. We'll fight the fight when we think there's a case for it. We defended the position and stood our ground. I mean, that's sort of fair enough, isn't it, Kieran? Like, I understand the feeling amongst fans about maybe the club needs to be stronger in certain aspects. And listen, I agree on the principle of that, because I think at times there's certainly been a disconnect between how forceful the club are when it comes to issuing statements with regards to the fans' behaviour, which is required, there's no doubt about it. But when it comes to things like, for example, the banner or the TIFO issue, rather, like, they made a bit of a mountain out of a molehill out of that. And that maybe has led to fans thinking, well, if you're going to be as strong as that on us, then you need to be as strong as that on everything else. Paul McGorrickle saying that they're meeting the SFA tomorrow. But I understand Patrick Stewart's point. In effect, it's not the hill to die on, but I do think you still have to. It's right that you question these things and call it out, because at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned personally, if you are the SFA and the SPFL and you want to impart a set of rules upon clubs and how their television channels should work and what they are allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say, what contributors are allowed to say, then what you need to do is sit down with all those clubs, get a broad consensus or a general consensus across the board and say, this is the criteria. If this is breached, here's the consequences. And then once you've done that, you dole out those consequences consistently. You don't pick and choose, because see, if you're going to pick and choose, wind your neck in. I'm sorry, I've seen the nonsense that there's been allegations of corruption made, of course, by Celtic TV. There's Irvin Welsh on Hibs TV referencing sticky buns, which we all know what he means when he says that, and saying that Alfredo Morelos should be chopped into tiny pieces and posted across the corners of the country. But that doesn't merit a fine, just a warning. Is that fans feel they need to be stronger?
Yeah, 100%. I think kind of the main point there is they're going to choose their battles. I think that's the biggest thing to take away there. But, I mean, it's hard for them to come out and say it is corrupt because the backlash. But then for them to say about Bomber's comments saying that there's no place for it and everything like that, like you've just touched on there, but where's the consistency of the fines for somebody else that said it in different fan medias? And it just seems that it's more of a, well, he says, she says kind of thing, instead of them just saying, look, fair enough. The best thing the SFA could have done was said, right, that's enough, no more slander, or there'll be fines from there on. And I think that maybe all the clubs would agree saying, okay, we'll just kind of rein it in a little bit. But what he said wasn't not true. The goal should have stood. Everyone knew it should have stood. And if the commentary team are as perplexed that the referee had made that decision to not only rule out the goal, but to then let Hibs go up and score, it's a bit of a kick in the stones. But I think realistically, Patrick Stewart has just kind of outlined, look, we are going to fight, but we'll choose the battles that we fight. I think he's kind of saying he's not going to let the fans dictate what battles they'll go into. They'll be prepped for for the SFA tomorrow, 100%. And there'll be a lot of comments I think will be made off the record, maybe asking why and a bit of clarity. Because again, none of us are at the meeting tomorrow. We don't know what they've been advised to say or what they can't say. And they're not going to tell the fans, as they did today, they're not going to tell the fans everything that should be said or what they're going to say. It's up to them. And if they're meeting them tomorrow, I 100% will guarantee they will make a good couple of comments off the record, finding out what's going on and what's the clarity from now on onwards.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Stuart. The thing is, people talk about different aspects of like the club to do. I think the club has done all it can do personally. I do feel though, when you put it in just for the stark contrast of it, when managers of clubs are told you cannot call an official corrupt or incompetent, you can't directly say that, right? So managers always tap dance around it more often than not. And yet, Brendan Rodgers, season before last, did exactly that when he actually directly called John Beaton incompetent after a Hearts game. What was his fine, Stuart? It was £1,700 and a suspended match ban. So why is what John Brown said, when he's not a manager, he's a co-commentator, why is that deemed worse? That's what I don't understand. I think that's where a lot of people fail to get it, even though the club, as I say, probably can't do much more than they've done.
So I think, first of all, you're asking a fairly impossible question to try and get inside the minds of the decision-making process.
You're the HMRC man, Stuart. If there's anybody who can answer impossible questions...
of those working in the Blazers and Hampden. Look, this is typical SFA just tying themselves in knots. They've made a rod for their own back with this now, because I agree with you, and I think a few of the comments, GD put it on there about the fact that Rangers made a comment. But actually, I thought the statement was decent. The fact, no uncertain terms, we will be watching now. And this is where the SFA have got themselves a problem, because it will happen at some point next season. Somebody is going to say something and it'll be out there. It won't be hidden. Nothing stays hidden now. And then Rangers fans will react. And you have a sense now that the club will react to that. And quite clearly, we might not hear it straight away. Maybe they'll go through kind of the back door for it at start. But then if nothing's done, then I think they're perfectly within their rights to then go a bit public with it to say, why is it not happening? I probably going to get myself bothered here. I also think this incident is maybe a wake-up call for us as a football club to look at Rangers TV and the offering that we have on it. Maybe we need to have a wee look at that and make it better. So, I love John Brown. Is John Brown a good analyst on games? I'm not convinced. Is Tom Miller a good commentator? I don't think anybody's really convinced by that. So I wonder if actually, we want, that might be something that we look at in terms of the offering. If you're wanting people to be paying for Rangers TV, are we offering the best out there? Yes, we understand it's going to be partisan and stuff like that, but I think that there could be potentially better that we could be doing out there. But regarding the fine, they have created a rod for their back for this, because I think we're in that it will be they'll just now be getting inundated with complaints, and rightly so.
100% they will, yeah, and absolutely, correctly so. But as I say, we'll see. Obviously, if anything earth-shattering comes of tomorrow's meeting and any breaking news happens, then I'm sure Martin or whoever else is on will bring that to you. Some people are saying bring back in the Dodds. I thought she was still doing some of the games for Rangers TV. Maybe I'm wrong.
I know that was a different scenario, but it did feel during COVID, the whole thing felt a whole lot more professional. And I know there was a kind of different. It was different because it was catering to season ticket holders because we couldn't get into the grounds and stuff like that. But I do think the standards have dropped away, and I don't know why that is. I think we should be, if you're asking fans to pay for something, why not try and offer them a really good service and try and get the best in there?
100%. I quite like the studio setup when they had with Emma Dodds, and then it was usually Neil McCann and Shelley Kerr. and I thought they were perfect. I thought they were quite good. I had no problem. Neil McCann is somebody who don't always agree with him, but I tend to enjoy listening to him because he does have some good insights. But yeah, I agree. I think you want best in class. We all remember we had Clive Tilsley for a while. Now, for me, if I was a club, I'd have been trying to keep a hold of him. But yeah, we'll see. Perfect time, Grant. Super chat there for Campbell Roberts, £5. Just as I mentioned Clive's name, that popped up as well. What happened to Clive, who did RTV during 55? Was he a one-off, or did he fall out with the club? It was only time RTV was watchable. I don't think he fell out with the club. No, I think
it was just the circumstances, wasn't it, Connor? It's because it was, it was almost as if they felt they had to do something because you, as a season ticket holder, you were being allowed to watch that game live, whereas you need to take a wee visit to a foreign country to watch it live. Yeah. So I think it was just that it was the different environment that done that. But I still think we could be doing better on that front.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I think it was just the circumstances. He had been let go from ITV because for some reason ITV thinks Sam Matterface is a better commentator than Clive Tilsley. Mm-hmm. I mean, somebody answer. You talk about impossible questions, Stuart. There's one. But anyway, that's a topic of conversation for another day. We've got a couple of minutes left, so let's just quickly do a bit of a transfer rumour roundup. Kieran, it's been reported that West Ham are apparently interested in Hamza Igaman. Now, I'm always reticent to delve too deep or read too much into these things because during a transfer window, it's reported that that clubs are interested in a lot of different players. So it doesn't necessarily mean formal offers will come to fruition. But what would your stance be on Igaman? He's a young lad. We don't need to sell him at all. We certainly don't need to sell ourselves short on him. But if you were the man in charge and West Ham picked up the phone to you, what would your conversation look like? What kind of ballpark would you be saying, right, this is what you're going to pay us or you're not getting them?
Depends what they're offering, to be honest. I see Igaman as a brilliant future prospect. I think that he's a really good player. I think that he's got a lot of raw parts to his game, but he is still only young. I mean, are we not quoting something about, well, again, fan media are saying usually about 12 and a half, I think, between that and upwards. I mean, Igaman, I'd be happy if we're in a position we don't have to sell. So if we're holding on to him for another season, does his price tag rise? Does other clubs come in for him? Does a wee bidding war come into play because they know we're not in a position just to sell him, to get him off the books, to get more money in? We're not in that position anymore. We can hold on to these players. The same with Raskin and go, that offer is not as good. And we do have that capability. I know we did it with Kenton Morelos before and they ended up biting us in the arse. But I think with a good bit of business, we could be saying, well, do you know what? That isn't as good as we think it is. Or you can do better than that. We know you can. And I feel that we do have that ace of spades that we can hold on to, and we don't have to just fold straight away. And I think that will suit us, but I think that will suit players as well, because if they want to get a move, they're going to have to work damn sight hard to get noticed and get that move.
Yeah, 100%. Stuart, I think Ian makes a good point, because it's something I'd be very, very keen on. If we as a club are going to sell a player like Hamza Igaman, with how young he is, they have got to put on a decent, some decent add-ons and a decent selling clause there, because quite frankly, I get sick and tired of hearing them bang on all the time about, Frimpong's going to Liverpool, so we're going to get XYZ amount of million, or Edward this, but they've been the business folk over there have been clever enough to put those sell-on clauses in. We should be doing the same if we're going to sell an asset like Igaman. If that's what happens, obviously, I'm not saying it will.
100%. Yes. Look, we talked last week about Rangers have got to start the story, and I think we were talking about Raskin more than Igaman last week, but this player trading model, Rangers have got to start the story here about selling at the right time and for an amount that players that are getting very decent money in for our players, so that then it builds that reputation that, you know, the next one that comes in, hopefully they do well. Another club comes in for them. They kind of know that they can't just come in and just pinch these players on the cheap from us. So every player in this squad will have their price. What that price is, we don't know. That's why Kevin Fairwell's going to get the big bucks in that job, to make those decisions, to say, right, that's the time that we let them go. Igaman's an interesting one. I've seen a few people make comments about, you know, does he fit the style and stuff like that. Again, time will tell on that. I'd love to keep him for another year, just to see, can he then make, you know, keep that kind of improvement going. But I think if a team like West Ham was to come in with a bid, I know Ian said 10, but let's say it was 15, plus you were then getting a sell-on fee on top of that, I wonder if Rangers would start to seriously consider it at that price, because I think that would be decent money. And like I say, it starts the story on this player trading model. But we don't have to sell. Kieran's right. We don't have to. But it doesn't mean that we, you know, if somebody comes in with a big offer for Raskin or Igaman, that they won't go.
No, absolutely, 100%. To answer your question, Gavin, and I'm not going to bring it up on the screen because I actually don't know if it could get us into trouble or not for YouTube, and I don't want Martin having a go at me. But no, I have never tried that, and don't ever do drugs, children. This is the answer to that question. Why do people ask these random questions, by the way? Our chat just sometimes goes in a world of its own. Jim has put in another £10 super chat just as we're about to round up. Thanks very much again, Jim. Much appreciated. You've basically built the Rabble now, bricks and mortar. But Jim's saying, I think Martin lost a fight with a tin of heroes, that's why. Well, I mean, look, we may never know the true story behind that. Martin will only ever, tell us what he thinks makes him sound a bit good. So we'll wait and see if we ever get the truth on that. But anyway, that will do us for now. I was going to play somebody comments to Paragon and Andrew. However, I forgot that me and Stuart are on tonight, and setting aside 8 minutes of time for anybody is always going to be difficult, as Kieran found out. But thanks so much for joining us, folks. Martin will be here tomorrow morning with your morning phone in, so make sure you pick up the old dog and bone and have a chat with Martin. You can even ask him about his arm. You can even dig further if you want the truth on that matter. And then, of course, you'll have your afternoon rabble as well tomorrow at 12:30, followed by your member show tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, where I believe Mr. Ian McDougall, Hamish, will be in the hot seat for that. So plenty to keep you entertained. My thanks to Stuart and Kieran. That's been a pleasure. And we will see you very soon.